Hey, how's it going? It's been a while. Life kinda kicked me in the ass, so I had to take care of that real quick. So let's get into a video that a lot of my friends were telling me I should make. And that is, what is it like having epilepsy? Honestly, it's not really my most favorite subject, but it's in the name, so might as well. So I got a couple questions from my friends, I got a couple offline. Now I'm gonna answer these at random. So the first question that a lot of people ask, even epileptics, is it curable? Well, epilepsy isn't quite curable, as it is manageable. The only way you can become quote unquote cured is if you just stop having them. And it does happen. Some people have epilepsy just for a while. Some less than a year, others a couple years down the line. You just don't know, but until and hopefully that time comes for you, you just take your pills, learn your triggers, and hope for the best. And speaking of triggers, we'll go on to the next question of what are triggers? Well, that's easy. It's what happens to set off your seizures. And there are plenty different triggers. Most common is visual, flashing lights, and so on. Then you have stress induced, you have some that are set off by being too hot, too cold. You even have auditory seizures. That's like when you have too many sounds going on at once and it's just too much for your brain to handle. I've had that happen before myself. Maybe once or twice, but it's happened. Now, my triggers are mostly lack of sleep and stress. But one of the other ones is heat. I cannot handle heat at all. I mean, it's bad enough that I run hot in the first place. Then you add summer, like there's a heat wave, and Jesus Christ, that is a recipe for disaster. Now, if you were to add that onto stress, lack of sleep, and the other factors, and it's just downhill from there. But that's me. Other people have their own things. Like some people are sensitive to too much cold. And a lot of people don't quite understand that. It's like, you mean to tell me too much of a certain temperature and you have a seizure? Yes. Epilepsy comes from a short circuit in the brain. If your brain can't quite handle something, well, you have a seizure. Plenty of people like myself have multiple triggers, and then you have people who have one trigger. We are indeed our own special snowflakes. And now the next one. Can you drive? Technically, yes, you can, but you're not supposed to. My state, Pennsylvania, used to have a 1 year limit based on your last seizure. It's like you have a seizure, you gotta wait a year to try and get your license, or if you already had your license, to get it back. I think it's been toned down to a couple months, like 6 months. But still, even if you haven't had a grand mal seizure, a big seizure, if you still have epilepsy, it's not wise to drive. All your brain needs is an overload, and boom, you crash into a pole, you crash into a car. Maybe you crash into children, who knows? Regardless, unless your doctor tells you you are seizure free forever, which there's no real guarantee, you shouldn't drive. It's a bitch, it sucks, but it is better than killing yourself or someone else. Now, next one, are there different kinds of seizures? As I said a bit ago, a grand mal seizure is a big seizure. That's the kind where you fall down, you flop around or get rigid, maybe chew up your tongue. That's a grand mal seizure. A petit mal, well, it's a small seizure. That can range from your hand shaking, your body just having tremors. A petit mal tends to be a seizure you're awake for. Grand mal seizures, you tend to pass out. And that's a great little segue into what is it like to have a seizure. And again, everyone's different. I've had petit mals where I just tremble a bit in the hand or maybe my legs. I've had a couple where I have tremors so bad they hurt. Times like that, I'd rather have a grand mal where I don't remember anything or I can't feel anything till afterwards. Now, I've had plenty of grand mal seizures, and while I just said I'd rather have them, in truth, I would just rather have neither. But when I have a grand mal seizure, usually I can feel it coming on. It's what doctors call an aura. You know, a sensation you get just before you have one. Now, if you're lucky, you have an aura. Some people don't. But when I have a full-blown seizure, as I said, you pass out. Your brain shuts down and your body does the work for you. And during those moments, you can chew the fuck out of your tongue. If you're a flopper, you can take out stuff, break bones, give yourself a concussion. Some people have died from having a seizure, flopping out of bed, and just shaking all over the place. Their hands, their legs, their head just flinging everywhere. If you hit your head hard enough, it's lights out forever. Me, I tend to go rigid. But one of the first times I had a seizure, it was one of the worst experiences I've ever had. I was walking toward the door to go to McDonald's and start my job. My first job ever, on the first day. So I didn't sleep much the night before. I was nervous as hell. And while walking to the front door, all of a sudden, I fall to my knees. And it wasn't like a trip where you have that moment of, oh shit, it was just drop. My legs were not working. And then shit went dark. Next thing I know, there's paramedics in the room. And I'm told that I pretty much army crawled to a wall and sat myself up against it and started going nuts. See, I have no recollection of that at all. So it's some scary shit. But let's move on to another one. And I'm going to do this one now because it's kind of a touchy subject for me, but right. Can you die from epilepsy? Now, at first I didn't know what they meant, and then I realized they meant, can you die from just having a seizure? Not falling down and flopping, just die. And the unfortunate answer is yes. There are instances where you have a bad enough seizure, you die. Your brain just cannot handle it. It's even got its own name. SUDEP. Sudden, unexpected death in epilepsy. Trust me, when I first heard of it, I was scared shitless. I mean, who wants to find out that just having a seizure can fucking kill you? Not because you fell out of bed and smacked your head or anything, but just because. Now, it's not a high percentage, but still, that fear is always in the back of your mind. I know a lot of people say, chances are slim, this will happen to me. It only happens in 1 in some odd number. But the thing to remember is, it does happen. Someone has to be that 1 in the some odd number. And it could very well be you. But let's get off that and into something with a little more levity. And that is pissing yourself. Well, yes. Yes, indeed, you can piss yourself. When I first started having seizures, all the time. Every time. Oh, but it gets worse than that. I know some of you are already thinking, that must mean you shit yourself. Yes, you can shit yourself. I have indeed shat myself. And sometimes not even when I'm having a grand mal seizure. Like I said before, epilepsy is a short circuit in the brain. Some people just go into a seizure, some people have auras, some people stare off into space. Their minds check out. And it's during those times when any kind of stimuli could set off a seizure. But sometimes you just come out of it. But during that time, your body doesn't really have any control over its functions. One time, I was just watching the telly, and all of a sudden I blanked out. When I came to, I was like, that was weird. And then I got up to take a piss, and it's like, wait a minute. Something feels a bit tacky in the back there. I chat myself. That was the first time, too. And I remember thinking I didn't feel a thing. What the fuck? Why wouldn't I notice this? And then I realized, well, how about that? You can just up and poop yourself. Doesn't happen often to me, but again, it has happened. There have been times I've woken up in the hospital to find that I've had to be cleaned because I'd done soiled myself in one way or another, and I have just left those clothes there. Someone brought me a change of clothes, and I just left the shitty drawers there. saying, fuck it, I don't need that reminder. Now let's move on, and this question is a bit more, well, I guess thoughtful in nature. And it's, are there any support groups? Oh god, there are plenty, but for fuck's sake, a lot of them are just so fucking annoying. Worst of all, are Facebook groups. You'd figure there'd be people trying to put others at ease and such, but no, it's a fucking competition. Oh god, I had this seizure the other night, and I did all this, and this so much damage happened to me, oh my god. And then someone's like, oh yeah? Well, this happened to me, and dear god, I did so much damage. And at times, when it's not about one-upsmanship, it's just a bunch of arguing about terminology. Is it okay to call having a seizure an episode? Is it okay to call it having a fit? People get heated about this shit. I mean, it would get so bad, I just dropped out of every group. I mostly just deal with this shit on my own. I mean, I've tried to be helpful to these people. They'd be like, oh, I'm having this issue and that issue, and I'm like, well, bring it up to your doctor. Oh, they won't listen, they don't care. It's their fucking job to care. They're specialists. If you don't bring it up, they don't know what to do for you. It's like talking to one of your girlfriends, well, lady friends, and she's in an abusive relationship, and you keep telling her, get out, just leave, and then she eventually marries the fucker. It's like banging your head against a brick wall till you get down to the white meat. Some of these groups try and impress on you that your life is shit and will forever be shit. If a group's not being helpful, stay the fuck away from them. Okay, this next one, I don't know. It's, if you have kids, well, they have epilepsy. I mean, statistics say it's not a high chance. I mean, there's a small one. But me, I am the only one with epilepsy in the family. And I mean the family. You know, aunts, uncles, and so on. Cousins. I'm the only one. So, who knows? I guess I was just lucky. But honestly, I think personally that the chances of having a child with epilepsy just because you do, it's low. It's not so much genetic as it is a luck of the draw. And there's nothing you can really do about that. Alright, let's move on. What medications can you take to help with your epilepsy? Well, I've been on a couple. And if you have epilepsy and your doctor is giving you a medication called Topamax, I would suggest you find something else. A common name for Topamax is Dopamax, because it turns you fucking stupid. I once spent 20 minutes trying to figure out how to tie my shoe, after already tying the other one. But right now, I'm on a generic form of Keppra called levetiracetam, and another medication called lamotrigine. These help me with my seizures, with my epilepsy, to try and manage them. But they're not 100% effective. No medication ever is. So I have this tablet called Klonopin, which if I feel a seizure coming on, I can place it between my cheek and gum or under my tongue, and it will dissolve. You know, it gets into the blood faster that way and can hopefully stave off the seizure. Me, it tends to knock out for a while. And sometimes I have a small seizure while I'm out. Sometimes I have no seizure. So it's quite effective. But it's also technically a narcotic. So it's easy to get hooked on. You know, it chills you out, it knocks you out. Some people find that's to be enough. And sometimes I worry I'm getting addicted because I use it quite often. There have been times I just felt a little queasy and took a Klonopin. One time I felt especially bad and took 2. Knocked me out for almost a fucking day. Woke up sore as fuck, thinking I had a seizure when most likely it was just because I didn't move. I slept in the same position all day long. You know, you gotta be careful with that kind of shit. It's almost as bad as getting addicted to a painkiller. At first, it works amazing, but the more you abuse it, the less effective it is, and then you gotta keep using more and more just to make it work. So if you're epileptic and you also take Klonopin, be careful. Okay, let's move on from that oh so joyful example. And this here is a good question. I really like this one. What should you do if you see someone having a seizure? And honestly, the only thing you can really do is put something soft under their head, because if they're a flopper, that head's gonna be hitting the ground really hard. And yeah, that's pretty much all you can really do. There are those myths that you should stick a spoon in there or something in there to keep you from swallowing your tongue. No. All that's going to do is either dislocate our jaw or break our teeth. There's also a danger to you too. If you try putting something in there and your fingers get too close, we can, honest to God, bite your finger off. Every muscle in your body is so tense that it has the power to bite through the muscle and bone that is in a human finger. Just put something under our heads so we don't bash our heads open and let us ride it out. I mean, if we're sitting in a chair or something, go ahead and try and get us on the ground, but do it carefully. There's a couple epileptics out there that when they have a seizure, their body is on autopilot, which means it has that flight or fight response. I've had this happen myself, where I had a seizure and my brother tried helping me, and he told me I just backed up, eyes wide, screaming at him. And there have been a couple times when I'm coming out of a seizure and there's a paramedic trying to help me and I start trying to fight him off. I haven't really thrown any punches, but I haven't been helpful. Now, I know people want to be helpful, they want to try and do what they can, but you just gotta sit there and wait. Okay, I'm going to do one more. I don't want this to go on. A lot of information is already online, but I'm responding to my particular seizures, how it affects me, and that's what the last question is how has being epileptic affected your life? And as you can imagine, not well. And I'm not just talking about the physical pain that comes with it, because there's pain if you have a petit mal seizure, there's the pain when you come out of a seizure. But I think the worst part is the mental damage it does to you. Because not only has something happened that you cannot remember at all, but you had no control whatsoever to stop it. And then you wake up to these people, to your family, who has seen it. You know, you see the looks on their faces, some of them have tears in their eyes, and it's just heartbreaking. I mean, I think I have a little bit of PTSD when it comes to epilepsy, because I don't know what I look like. No one's ever videoed me having one. You know, it's not something you think about. Oh, he's having a seizure. Let's get the camera. So I tried looking at videos on YouTube of people having seizures, and I can't do it. Whenever they start going into one, I have a little mini panic attack. Hell, my eyes even well up a little bit. I see someone else having a seizure, and it just fucks with my mind. Now, I'm not going to compare my little PTSD to someone who's been to war or has had a tragic event happen to them, but I think I do have a little bit when it comes to my epilepsy. You know, it's greatly impacted my life. I can't drive. No one will really hire me for anything. The only real job I've ever had is working at a McDonald's. Because yes, after my first seizure, before my first day ever started, I still went to work eventually. Christ, it was a horrible, horrible experience. Not just because the managers took advantage of me being unable to say no, staying after hours to do work I shouldn't have been doing, but all that heat, all that stress, and I worked the wall. That's where you do the fries, the chicken, the nuggets, the fish, all that heat, all that stress, I had several seizures there. And the fucking managers talked me into not filing any accident reports or whatever you call them. But yeah, ever since McDonald's, I haven't been able to find any real gainful employment. Usually because I'm too much of a risk. And it's not only being unable to do things, but it's having to rely on people. Nobody wants to feel like a burden, but a lot of these people in these situations, they have no choice. You know, a lot of them go on welfare, or they try and get disability. I should probably end this, but I'm gonna give you one more thing, a personal story about me and my worst seizure ever. Also, my most weirdest one. Now, a couple years back, we had my grandpa living with me, and one of my jobs was at a certain time of day to go get him his lunch. Now, on this particular day, I remember staying up real late. I mean, check out the name, Insomniac. There's a reason why I use it. So I went to bed, probably 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. And then the next thing I know, I'm in a hospital room. My mother's sitting in a chair right next to me. And the first thing that comes out of my mouth is, I had a seizure, didn't I? And honestly, I could have dealt with that. I've had plenty. But this one was fucking bonkers. While I was unconscious, I was still up and about. Okay, I was on the second floor. I went down the stairs, which our home at the time was pretty dangerous on its own if you were conscious about it. Because there was a little turn at the bottom that if you weren't paying attention, you went a-sliding. So, I am told that while I was unconscious, I went down these stairs, got my grandfather his lunch, went back upstairs, went to sleep. I was found having a grand mal seizure. Paramedics came and got me, and because I was yelling about my shoulder, they did an x-ray on my shoulder. Now, every time I've gone to the doctors for x-rays or anything, they usually make me stand. Now, I don't know if I stood for these or if they had me lying down. No one remembers. And I was even told that while I was in the ER when I was first brought in, I went into another seizure. Try and understand how scary that is. I didn't just have a seizure. I did shit before the seizure. I possibly stood while taking an x-ray. Apparently, I was talking to people. I was talking to doctors. I was talking to the physicians in the ER. I was talking to my mother. Apparently, I'm the one who told her I was going to go into another seizure, and then I did. But the only thing I remember is going to sleep and waking up in the hospital room. And weirdly enough, I did damage my shoulder. The muscles in my arms and my shoulder contracted so hard that I crushed that little ball joint that goes into the shoulder. I crushed it, so now there's a crack in there, and there's like little bone splinters from when it happened. And even to this day, I have a limited range of motion. So, I had a seizure, was up and about doing my chores, damaged my shoulder, which apparently I was screaming about while unconscious, and I don't remember any of it. If anything would give me PTSD, that would be it. And now that I've made myself depressed, after having to do this a couple times because I started to well up while talking about this last bit, I thank you for your time. Have a good day.